Hello, everyone. We are recording live from Studios B3, and I'm Spencer Brinkerhoff III. See how that works? Studios B3.
I see. Nice.
Welcome to our Star Wars Rebels video roundtable. Tonight we are going to talk about Season 3, Episode 13, titled Warhead. These episodes originally premiered on January the 14th in 2017, and this episode specifically was written by Gary Whitta. So we've got an esteemed panel of guests with us today. I'd like to welcome them and welcome all of you to our video podcast. We'll start with Sean McMillan from Radio Free Tatooine. Sean, welcome to Studios B3. Does that feel weird?
Hey, a little bit. Yeah, I've never been in Studios B3.
Right.
And it's getting fancier all the time. Last week it was a room. Now it's
Right.
a green area.
Well,
It's
see,
very
yeah, and that's what I was saying to Brandon just a little while ago. I'm trying to do something a little bit different, a little bit new with every show, so that I can experiment a little bit. And so this time I've got a green screen, but I'm live editing the green out. So hopefully this works seamlessly
I
and
just pulled the
magically.
curtain back and ruined
Yeah, thanks.
the
And
whole thing.
it's
The
a
illusion
it's a
is
green
ruined now.
curtain,
That's right.
so it's
Right.
emerald. And that
Yeah.
other voice that you just heard is Brandon Schoonover. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, Brandon, we spoke just a little bit when we were starting up here, and I was asking about other podcasts that you've been involved with. I was asking about other shows, and you were telling me about Star Wars and how you like podcasting because it's a chance to talk Star Wars, right?
That's right. Even my friends that are Star Wars fans don't quite get into it as deep as I like to get into it. So it's nice to be among my fellow Star Wars fans
Right.
that we can get as deep as we want to be.
Well, isn't that odd that we all enjoy Star Wars so much that we think that everyone else is kind of on our level? And I personally, I don't feel that I'm like this really like over the top fanboy, but at the same time, I've got a lot of useless knowledge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird. Sometimes you'll find yourself in conversation with me and my co-host, or a couple of my other friends that uh, you end up in a group and you're all talking, and suddenly one person mentions the dynamics of Quinlan Vos with Asajj Ventress and how unlikely that would be, but how it works. And you notice like 3 or 4 people in the room just check out. And you realize, oh, I have to pull back and explain who Quinlan Vos is and explain who Asajj Ventress is. And by that point, I'm out of the room. So,
Right. Right.
yeah, it is kind of nice being with my peoples.
Yep. Well, let's go ahead and speaking of those peoples, let's go ahead and jump in a little bit. I'd like to start with a little bit of a recap. Now, this episode, our crew leaves Chopper Base in, of course, the capable hands and care of Captain Zeb, salute. And then as they depart, they go off to a training mission. Now, and to sort of avoid some of the boredom that AP5 was sort of initiating with all of this inventory, Zeb heads out. He fix up the disabled perimeter sensor, and while they're out there, they discover a droid. And instantly he thinks, "Hey, this is a good idea. I think I'd like to go ahead and bring this droid back, to base, and we'll play with this for a little bit." So let's jump off with that point right there. Last episode, I told everybody that watching Iron Giant would be good homework. I was sort of like speculating what was going on. Brandon, you said that you didn't
Yeah.
quite get a chance to see Iron Giant beforehand, but do you know what I was talking about when I made that reference, or did you see that at all in the show?
Yes, a little bit, where you had a robot, and in this sense a droid, um, who doesn't know his programming or forgets his programming for a while, and eventually it all goes to pot.
Right.
So
And he becomes a giant gun.
right,
And yeah,
right.
So I thought that was kind of fun, but really I don't know, maybe there's just not quite enough episode to fill out a whole Iron Giant arc in there. But,
Right.
are there other instances where we have like the forgetful, robots, that turn on you, or What did
Well,
you think about
you,
that?
you know what it kind of reminded me of was almost a month ago on Christmas Eve, my wife and I quite often watch Gremlins
Oh, okay.
as one of our favorite Christmas movies. And as I
Great.
was watching it, I did feel like this was like they bring this Mogwai in, and it's like, oh, look at this droid. It's helpful. It's cute. It's doing some things. And then, oh no, they fed it after midnight.
Exactly.
And I just thought it was interesting that I had just watched that, and otherwise I probably wouldn't have made that connection. But I,
Right.
throughout the episode, got a very Gremlins kind of vibe because it turns kind of horror
You
themed,
know,
Right.
and I noticed that as well. I mean, as soon as the droid, what's his name,
Uh,
EXD9.
yeah.
So as soon as that droid like loses his hand, the tone shifted. I mean, did you
Yeah.
sense that, Brandon? You want to talk about the tone and how it changed and what kind of vibe that you started getting from the show?
Yes, I thought it was a very sort of classic monster flick, horror movie genre. It turned in, and at that moment, and it even though with a show like Rebels, the pacing is, for me, it seems like it's really quick. It's a really quickly paced show, so you didn't get quite that kind of suspense built. Plus, you
Right.
don't want to scare kids. Let's be honest.
Not too much
Sure.
Too
anyway.
much. um, so, but yeah, there was I kind of felt like I was watching Predator at times,
Right.
or some other kind of
Hmm.
monster flick where you're looking for a monster that's loose,
Now, now
in the compound.
speaking of Predator, wasn't there a Predator reference in this one as well? Did you guys catch that?
With the time,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
So
Oh yeah.
the EXD9, when it started to count down and the proton warhead was about to explode, the countdown that was on his chest, those symbols were sort of like reminiscent of one of the Predator alien sort of symbols, right? I'm not super familiar with that series, so you guys might need to tell me, more than I,
Yeah,
I don't know.
honestly, I thought it looked really familiar, and I thought um, that like those kind of symbols, it's not Aurebesh, and it's not. I mean, in
Right.
Star Wars for numbers, they basically just use stylized numbers.
Yeah.
Um, so seeing those, I thought, man, that does look familiar from somewhere. And yeah, now that I think about it, I hadn't connected the dots, but that does look a lot like Terminator
Well, you know what else is
or
that?
Predator.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Predator. I believe that the sort of like randomizing digits that are on Boba Fett's like chest armor, that are over here on his
Mm,
left chest, it's got that sort
sure.
of same sort of symbol to it as well. We've got a
Yeah.
Mandalorian episode coming up next week. We'll have to ask our Mando mercs if they can identify that was a Predator symbol or if it was a Mando symbol.
there you
Yeah,
go.
really.
So the other thing that I was thinking about when we hit this sort of like the horror genre, and he started to sort of like follow the trail of oil that had been leaking, was that they used Chopper as bait. And I thought, okay, this is sort of a Scooby Doo, sort of like a mystery at this point, and we're
It
getting
absolutely
Chopper as
is.
the bait, and I'm like, Scoob never wants to go out there and be the bait, but at the same time, he
Yeah.
always sort of like gets tricked into it. Chopper kind of comes across as he can be a hero, but I think that he's always in it to save his own skin. What do you think, Sean? Do you think that Chopper was sort of like willingly being the bait, or did he sort of like have control of the situation? I don't.
I think it kind of reminds me of last season when Zeb is the bait
Oh, when they're fishing.
when they first meet the clones and they're fishing for those giant like sandworm
Right,
things.
right,
Um, I kind of got the same vibe there where similarly he didn't want anything to do with it, but I was kind of shocked in that episode how cool Zeb was with it once he found out what he was doing and what the plan was.
right.
He was pretty cool with it. And I personally was like, there's no way anyone would do that.
Right.
So seeing Chopper do the same, I guess isn't as big of a stretch because droids are a little easier to put back together than Lasat are, presumably.
I guess. Well, now there's more than one Lasat out there. We should be okay.
Right?
So
Patch one together if you must.
Now, Brandon, also, we were talking a little bit about sort of like Star Wars and the Star Wars influence, and you said that you've been really into Rebels, and probably even more so than some of your other Star Wars friends. And I love that you mentioned Ralph McQuarrie and that you keep seeing those references. We
Yeah.
see a reference to The Empire Strikes Back with the sort of those probe droids and the infiltrator droids being shot out of the Imperial the Star Destroyer. But let's talk about the Ralph McQuarrie influence on this one. Brandon, you wanna kind of recap that a little bit?
Right. So the what was the name of the Imperial droid again?
EXD9.
EXD. You know what I was thinking about is
EXD9.
that this is on Disney XD, right?
Right.
Disney
My goodness.
XD. It's EXD 9. I don't know what the 9 is for, but
I don't know. Maybe
yeah.
he'll show up in episode 9.
yeah.
There's 8:30, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, the when it's in sedentary mode or whatever his the protocol mode, that droid is was Ralph McQuarrie's original design for C-3PO. The classic two shot of that droid as 3PO and R2 is I believe is one of the first paintings that he made in production of the first Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
I know he did sketches and things before production began, but that painting is one of the first paintings he did, I believe. And so, yeah, I mean, it's almost exactly the same, different color scheme, but almost exactly the same design as Ralph McQuarrie's original design for C-3PO.
And I believe
which is great. I thought it looked great.
Oh yeah, and I believe in that same sort of like concept art painting, the droid that's in the background is sort of the droid that became R2-D2, but he has that same sort of like dome and the arms sticking out, which is now Chopper. So this episode was sort of like a reuniting of those original two McQuarrie, concepts in Chopper and EXD9.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and keep in mind,
yeah,
the other main character in this was Zeb, who is also a McQuarrie design.
Oh, right, right.
So like the big three in this episode are all like, it's a McQuarrie painting coming to life, and more than ever in this episode.
I love it. I love it. Now, speaking of those other sort of like influences that we have, just briefly, as Hera is about to leave and go off to this training mission, she hollers at two new pilots and tells them to get going. Sean, do you remember who that was that got called out there?
Hobby and Wedge.
Hobby and Wedge.
Absolutely. I want to see them this is the exact kind of role I wanted for them. They're iconic because they're, especially Wedge, because he's in all the movies, and he doesn't play a big role as far as lines or anything. The average person on the street has no idea who Dennis Lawson is, but fans love him. And so in this show, as soon as they introduced Wedge, I was like, please just put him in a bunch of episodes doing very little. And
exactly like his movie role.
Like, fist pumped. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know. Look, I'm not going to belittle what he did for the rebellion. Surviving 2 Death Star runs is a big deal, but I just love him being there and doing just a little bit off the side of the screen.
Now, I'm not very familiar with Hobby. Brandon, do you know that Hobby character very good, or Sean? I don't know. I thought I'd throw that one to Brandon. I'm not trying to stump you on air. I'm just saying.
Sure. Yeah. No, he was in Rogue Squadron. So not in episode 4. He debuts in The Empire Strikes Back.
He was in Empire, right?
And I believe he was Wedge's gunner.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I don't know, but he was one of the rogues in that, and then he gets a lot more story time in the expanded universe as well. Both he and Wedge in the X-Wing series, which I have not read.
Right.
So
now, are we supposed to infer anything by the way that they bump together that maybe they're not the best pilots out there, or what? Brandon, what did you think?
I was kind of thrown by that a little bit. I thought, are they going to be like a Laurel and Hardy type of deal? Is it going to be they're the bumbling side characters? And so I was a little thrown by that, because when we see Wedge in the classic trilogy, he's not anywhere close to that kind of character.
Right.
So
Right.
that threw me a little bit. I got to be honest. But
Plus,
but
just the kind of
it came and
guy.
went so quickly that it was, it's not. I can't make any. I can't infer anything about on that alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But are two Laurel and Hardy's the kind of guys that you would risk everything, and Sabine would put her herself on the line for to recruit?
Right.
Right.
I
Probably.
already thought that episode was a bit strange that they risked that much to get a grand total of 2 pilots, or did they
Well,
get a?
some of the other
I think,
pilots died in,
yeah.
in sort of the extraction,
Yeah,
but
right.
I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's another good point. So I saw an article online, and I'm terrible because I didn't write down who wrote the blog post. But there's been some concern out there, or some chatter, that this is a filler episode, and as a filler episode, it just wasn't as grand. And the
Mhm.
blogger that I read, they made this point that this episode helped to identify the difference between the Empire and the Rebels. And really what we're seeing is that the Rebels have heart, and the Rebels are working to sort of like get all of this stuff together, even though, they don't have, the best equipment. They don't have the best, tools, but they're together. So even if they're bumbling a little bit and they kind of knock into each other as they're off to their mission, at the same time, they're still rebels, and they're working together to make all of that happen. So I thought that was a
Yeah.
good way. How about you guys? Did you guys feel that this was like one of those filler episodes, or I didn't feel like there was a lot of like big storytelling, but Thrawn was in it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I have been critical in the past sometimes about the filler episodes, but I personally feel like this one was, look, Rebels has a short format. You
Right.
got 22 minutes to tell a story, and they don't do these like 3 and 4 episode arcs very often, like the Clone Wars did all the time. So you
Right.
really have to tell them fast. So when they're not linking episodes together like they tend to do at the beginning or end of seasons, sometimes they do kind of come off that way if something major doesn't happen. So nothing major happened in this one, so to speak, but I felt like it worked on a lot of levels that just from a fun perspective, I didn't watch it and think, but what's the point? I watched it and thought, I get the point. I'm having a blast. I
Right.
love AP5. I love Zeb.
Right.
There was a
Mhm.
lot of good stuff going on, and even at the end, they even tied it into, here's what the point is.
Yeah.
Thrawn just narrowed his search from this
Down
to
to those
this.
94 planets.
Yeah,
Well,
Right.
which sounds like a lot, but in the galaxy,
right.
it's not much.
What do you think,
I
Brandon?
thought the same thing. The point or the point of the episode was to show, like you said, to show the difference between the Empire and the Rebellion, and and Thrawn's a part of it. And it was a bottle episode of sorts, but
a bottle
it,
episode? What do you
a
mean by
bottle episode. It exists in a bottle,
Oh, right. Gotcha.
right.
That makes sense.
But it does it didn't feel like a filler episode to me as much as the episodes we got leading up to Rogue One,
Oh, right.
especially
Yeah.
where it just seems like they were going
Iron
on a
Squadron.
mission,
Right.
right? And
Right.
they were going on the mission of the week, and then once the mission was over, we were back to like no stakes had been raised. And this
Right.
one, the stakes are being raised. I felt at the end of the episode, I definitely got the feeling that stuff's about to happen, things are gonna change.
Well, and I think
moving
that
forward.
that's really important, is that I looked up a little bit to try and see how many episodes are left in the rest of this season, and I didn't find that many more. Sean, do you know how many are left in the season?
No, I don't. That's a good question.
Now,
Because it can't be more than 5 or 6,
yeah,
right?
well, yeah, and
I
that's
would
the thing,
think.
is that I think that I only found like 3 more episodes, but maybe just the list is not out yet. But if we look at that mid-season trailer and all of the action that takes place there, and what looks to be the sort of like the attack on Chopper Base, and then we see in this episode that Thrawn has narrowed his search, really, it's not a filler episode. We're moving towards this gigantic battle that's going to happen on Chopper Base, and that's going to be a big deal there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I think there were descriptions for the next 3 or 4 episodes, but and that may be what you're referring to, Spencer, but I don't know about how many total there will be, but there can't be much more, I wouldn't think.
Right. And well, I was gonna get into some speculation stuff, but let's talk a little bit more about the droids in this episode. So we talked a little bit about AP9 and about sort of like him as a character, but let's talk about him and his attitude. I mean, what's up with this guy? He was really sort of like negative to Zeb. Brandon, do you think that he was like, it was outside of his programming the way that he was acting, or do you think that that was right in line? How did these droids get to be so negative?
I think it's probably a holdover from his Imperial programming. The Empire isn't one to take kindly to aliens or to anyone that's not a white British dude. So,
Right, right. Thank you, white British
so
dudes.
Right.
So I think that might be a little bit of that. He doesn't think anything of Zeb. He doesn't, even though he's working for the good guys now, he has that attitude, those preconceived notions about what aliens are capable of, and
Right.
especially ones that are big and strong.
Yeah, I thought that
Like
was your
Zeb.
thing, lifting and punching stuff, right?
Right. Right. I
I,
thought
I
he
That's
was
your plan.
hilarious
Grab
in
him.
yeah,
his one-liners in the episode. I was cracking up at every single one of them.
that's right, Sean.
Is it
Yeah.
because you never learned to count?
Right.
I could teach you.
I could teach you. And I don't think that he was being mean. I think he was actually like, that was just a flat out statement. It's like,
Right.
I could teach you. It's like,
Right.
I'm sorry that you are you. Let me help you be better.
It's
Right.
a shade of K2SO, right? I mean,
Yes.
who also is a
Yes.
former Imperial droid. I mean, I love K2SO as evidenced by K2SO
Actually,
on my desk.
hold on
How
just
you
a
doing?
second. I'm going to move your Skype window over. Oh, wait, hold on.
Ah,
That's not working. I was going to try and move the Skype window over so I can expose. There he is. Look at K2SO. Oh my
that's
gosh.
my guy.
So there's a crazy sort of a forced perspective thing going on in the video, and I thought that's standing full size by your door.
Oh.
That looks awesome.
Oh, he's a big guy, but he's the 31-inch line, I believe. Um, but yeah, I feel like there's a bit of similarity there. I love K2SO, and I think I like AP5, but I don't know, K2SO is like my thing. But I could see how they were both former Imperial, and kind of like you mentioned, Brandon, that they were programmed a little differently than some of these other droids.
Right.
And I'm sure that as much as 3PO is overly fussy and overly polite and concerned with protocol, an Imperial droid of the same kind of build might not be so polite. They don't care about being polite. They care about being efficient, and they care about doing the job and getting it done right, and they have no time for courtesy.
Right.
So I can see where that can kind of manifest into reprogramming to K2SO gets a little screwy, and maybe a similar thing with AP5. Maybe he feels a little abandoned because
Yeah.
the Empire just left him behind. Maybe droids do kind of get that.
Yeah, with the show comes out on Saturday, and I like to watch the Rebels Recon afterwards, and then explore the guide, that's on Monday, and then we come in and record on Tuesday. So we've had a little bit of time to sort of soak things up. And one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about this episode of Rebels Recon is that Dave Filoni mentioned that his one regret with this episode was that he didn't make now EXD9 into K2SO's type of a droid. So that would have been great to see,
Right.
another callback. And speaking of those other callbacks, we know from, and I mentioned this previously, we know from the Rogue One guide that Callus, not Callus, sorry, Fulcrum was a code name that was used by Diego. Geez, why am I spacing on
Cassian.
Cassian Anders' name?
Yeah. Okay.
So this time we get Fulcrum again, and we get to hear Fulcrum again. How much better is it, Brandon, to like hear Fulcrum and see Fulcrum and then see that logo and know who it is and know what's going on? Is that awesome or what?
That is awesome. Well, I think the first Fulcrum we had, everyone had pretty much guessed who it was,
Right.
and it was sort of like they were trying to trick the audience. At least I felt that way, and it was like, "Come on, guys, we know who Fulcrum is." But
Mhm.
now that the audience and they have told the audience who it is, I agree. I think it adds a lot. It adds a different dimension to that character and to whenever they interact with the voice of Fulcrum.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely.
and then we get to see Callus sort of like doing his job, and he's still sort of like into his job, and he's doing a good job, but at the same
Right.
time, he's like, I better drop these guys a line and just let them know that something may be coming their way, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Callus goes and talks to Thrawn at the end of the episode, and he says, "Wow, that plan was quite ingenious." And he's like, "They thought of it on their own. I didn't even have anything to do with that." And Thrawn agrees with him.
Mhm.
That was pretty cool. Sean, do you think that Thrawn is going to discover Callus? Are we going to see that happen near the end of this season?
I think he is, because I think that Callus has quickly transitioned since we discovered very recently that he's actually a part of the Fulcrum program. Uh, that he's become one of my favorite characters
Yeah.
because he has more on the line than anyone right now, personally. I mean, the rebels are in it for the rebellion, but realistically, one of them could step away.
Right. Right.
And I mean, they feel this obligation, but they could step away. Callus is in it up to his mutton chops right now. He, you know, being a double agent for the Empire is a dangerous game.
Yeah.
And when Thrawn throws up, when Thrawn shows up, it's a very serious game. Like, I mean, when you're we've all been there where you're like goofing around at work, you're doing a crossword, or you're on your phone, or just daydreaming or whatever, and your boss walks by and you straighten your desk and you're like, try to look busy.
Right.
Now imagine that being essentially, Thrawn.
Yeah, so, someone that could
That's
kill you.
terrifying.
I mean,
And
the
you're not
stakes are
just
higher.
daydreaming, you're actually a traitor.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think they've got to play with that. It's too good a story to not tell.
Right. Right. Yeah, and so that's the thing is I'm not sure where that's going to show up or how it's going to show up, but I think that that's coming. Now,
Mhm.
one of the other things that I wanted to talk about that I thought was interesting, sort of in regards to this interaction with my, you see that was awesome. Something that happened. That's why we're live here today. You get to see all the behind the scenes. One of the things that was great is we got to see this interaction with Fulcrum. We got to see Callus, as Fulcrum, sort of like wink at the camera a little bit and kind of smirk and know that what's going on. And then I started to think about Zeb's plan. And Zeb's plan was to take that proton warhead and send it back to where it came from and let it detonate. And I thought, isn't Fulcrum on one of those ships? There's a chance that Zeb would have been blowing up Fulcrum when he sent that thing back. I was I the only one that thought that or had any sort of a fret there, or
maybe that's just kind of a risk that Zeb would think. Fulcrum understands the risk. He knows what's going on. So if this is what we have to do to save the rebellion, this is what we have to do to save the rebellion.
Right.
I hadn't thought of that until you mentioned it, but yeah, there was a very real possibility that was going to be him.
Yeah. I mean, unless somehow he knew Fulcrum was not on the same ship that the droids were going to be sent, or the pod was going to send back up, but I don't know how he would have known that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. So I wanted to kind of like, I think we've covered most of the points that I was interested in, and we can talk more. I mean, I like talking, but I wanted to ask you guys about sort of like your first impressions, right? You knew what was coming, you had some thoughts there. What was your thought sort of like as soon as the show ended? You kind of went, oh yeah. Did you have any questions that were left, or Brendan, like you said, this was a show in a bottle, and so everything was self-contained, nothing was really left out. What were some of those first thoughts in closing there, closing out the show?
Well, something very specifically I noticed as the episode ended was, did you guys see the bottom of the Star Destroyer that Thrawn was on? It looked like to me like it had a design
Oh yeah,
on the bottom of it, like
yeah.
his lizards, his
They were kind
lizard
of
creatures.
winding together
Oh,
and
the Issa
stuff. Yeah.
Lamiri, or
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
huh?
Good
And I
Okay.
catch.
kind of, and I saw that, and I was at first I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, and then I got to thinking, would the Empire really allow an admiral
Customization.
to customize his
Yeah,
Star Destroyer?
and as you're saying about a custom Star Destroyer, I'm like, pimp my Star Destroyer, right? Who's the guy that has to paint that? And how do they even like line it all up? I don't know how that would even happen. So that's,
Isn't
yeah.
that kind of your job, Spencer?
Well,
I mean,
okay.
someone hires you to take a Star Destroyer and make it
Yes,
really
yes,
shine.
that's what I do. That's what I do. No, I'm thinking about the scale of that. So I can draw on my screen and it's this big, and then it's all vector, so we can scale it up to any size. But once you blow something up that big, you're going to see all sorts of flaws. So I mean, that's got to
Right.
be, yeah. How long did that take?
Yeah,
No.
but so I'm not sure how that fits with the idea of the Empire, but anyway, it was kind of cool looking, I thought.
Well,
That
and
was something very specific I thought of.
I think that Thrawn, sort of like as an alien in the
Mhm.
Empire, is already an outsider. They do a
Yeah.
lot to sort of like make it be these guys. It's these British white guys that are in charge. Nothing against British white guys, but I'm just saying that the Empire has been traditionally made up of just these one section, right? And so
Sure.
Thrawn is. And I don't know all of Thrawn's backstory, but I believe that he has constantly been fighting against this prejudice because he doesn't fit in with that normal sort of like image type, you know?
Right.
Right.
And like, we know his reputation from books, and I mean, he's been around in the fan universe for a long time, but as he exists in canon, he's a relatively new character.
Right.
And so I think it's interesting that, from reading the Thrawn trilogy, and knowing what we know about him, like, yeah, he is terrifying. He's a military genius. He's a tactician. He plays games much like a cat and a mouse. But it's always been a question of mine in watching him on Star Wars Rebels. I'm like, how did he get command? What are his actual achievements at this point? Because he
Right.
keeps just letting him get away, which
Right.
I know Thrawn. I would let him do. Thrawn's gonna Thrawn.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
He knows what
But
he's doing.
like, he must have proven himself time and time again at
Right.
this point. And I'm
Well,
curious about what that is.
And Sean, I think that that's a really good point, is that he must have proven himself to the point where they allow him to seemingly let the rebels get away, because he's got a plan and he knows what he's doing. Now, Timothy Zahn has written a new book, a new Thrawn book. Do you know when that is going to be released? Because I don't think that it's out yet. We've had the Ahsoka book, we've got Catalyst, we have. Is there another one that's been sort of like recent that ties into this stuff? But
The next. Oh, I was gonna say the next Aftermath comes out soon too. What is it? Empire's End.
oh, okay, right. And
Right.
those ones take place between episodes 3 and no episodes what 6 and 7.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's how it works.
Right.
Yep.
Looking here real quick, that the Thrawn book just says publication date 2017.
Yeah,
So
that's all I'm
I don't-
finding too.
Okay.
I don't know if they haven't. Oh, I'm seeing here. It looks like April 11th, 2017.
Hey,
So
Nice.
I'm looking
Excellent.
forward to that book.
Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe we'll get an answer to how he came to rise and the Empire within the new canon.
Right.
On that book, I would think that would be a main, because right now we're just kind of like, we know Thrawn is scary, but if you go
But
on
to a
just what you're
newcomer, like, he's just that blue guy that keeps letting him get away. He's
Right,
terrible at his
exactly
job.
with
You
the
know?
red
he's
eyes,
just
right?
he's coasting on reputation
Yeah.
only, really,
And
at
you
this
know how
point.
the Empire is that if you mess up in the Empire, you're out.
Right.
You know, you're
Right.
force choked if Vader's around. If not,
Right.
like in the Thrawn
Mhm.
trilogy, someone messes up and he orders I think it's Pelion. He orders Pelion to shoot one of the guys because they all messed up. He's like, you got to make an example. Someone needs to get shot.
Right.
And that's how the Empire works.
Yeah.
So for Thrawn to be able to do this and just let him get away, let him get away, let him get away, yeah, he's got to have something banked. You know,
Well,
I mean,
and I'm very much looking forward to the book, and this is Tim Zahn coming back and writing this, and it's wonderful because, you know, as soon as shortly after the purchase of Lucasfilm by Disney, and then they made that difference between the canon and the legendary tales, and then everybody was really voicing their disappointment that the Thrawn stories had all been thrown into canon. I love that Tim Zahn's response to that, and I hope I'm getting it right because I wouldn't want to misquote him, is that he said legends had to come from somewhere. And so even though those are legend tales, you know, they had to come from somewhere. And as a result, you know, those books, there's kernels of truth in there. And I really,
Sure.
I really love that.
well, yeah, and they've definitely mined bits from Legends books. Here and there, you know, I mean, they've in the Clone Wars pulled. Well, I guess there wasn't a Legends distinction at the time, but they pulled in Darth Bane, and if you look at the Force Awakens, there's definitely some similarities. I'm not saying they're the same, but I mean, Kylo Ren
Right.
and Jason Solo are not coincidence. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Right.
they're pulling inspirations. But I am really glad to see that with Thrawn, they just said, nope, this character, just pick him up, stick him right here.
Yes.
He works.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he seems exactly like the same character.
And we don't need to have a backstory every time we get the character. You know, it's fun to be able to explore that all over the place.
Sure.
And so, thinking about, you know, this sort of like this scary character and sort of like that fear and sort of like the tone of all of this, I was reminded of a scene from the episode that we haven't talked about yet. And what happens is EXD9 has lost his hand. You know, he's roaming around, and Chopper has been sent out to like track him down. And Chopper comes around the corner, and he's like hovering over the top of that gonk droid, and he kind of like turns and looks over his shoulder, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Voldemort over the unicorn in the forest. He's drinking its blood, you know.
Yeah.
And I totally got that horror vibe from that scene and really
I
appreciated
can
it.
see that.
I
Yeah,
love
I,
that
I,
part.
kind of thought he looked like the Wampa too from Empire
Oh
Strikes Back.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I pointed at. Did you see that? I pointed at the camera and brought my hand down and grabbed my headphones and made the whole camera shake. Ow!
Uh,
This podcasting is dangerous
live
stuff,
video.
man. It's live.
It is.
It's live.
It's live. Anything can happen.
Just waiting for the kids to walk in next, right?
Yeah,
Right.
we've got two of them up there that are sleeping. Hopefully.
Awesome. Yes.
So,
Well, I think that with that point, I've hit most of the things on my notes that I really thought were interesting about the episode, things that I wanted to talk about further. I felt like, in general, the episode was, you know, it just sort of like all kind of fell together, right? You know, when EXD9 was inside of his shuttle and he was about to go back, you know, and he started up his long-range scanner and he was about to fire off that message that he'd found rebels, and Zeb shoots it, you know, and I was like, he didn't get out to investigate that, you know? I mean, so there were some things that I just kind of went, okay. we're just moving along. But all in
Yeah.
all, I
Right.
felt like it was a good episode. It was a fun episode. Lots of good jokes and lines. I like the way that the AP5 was teasing and
Mm-hmm.
Chop was along for the ride as well. How about you guys? Is there anything that we've left out in the episode? Any glaring mistakes that we've overlooked?
No, I don't think so. I think I would agree with you on what you just said. I guess one thing that I hadn't really expressed enough was how much I like. I never feel like I need a Zeb episode, but
Right,
every time I get one, I am so happy that I got one.
right.
I mean, he's a fun character. Steve Blum is an amazing voice actor. I've always loved his work. And this is a perfect role for him to get to kind of play around. And it turns out that he's not just a big guy that punches stuff
Right.
and picks stuff up.
Right.
He keeps proving hijinks always ensue, but at the end of the day, he is a good commander and he's a smart cookie.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
enjoyed that a bit too, quite a bit too. Go ahead, Brandon.
I think a couple of things I wrote down here, just anecdotal things from the episode that I thought we should mention. Did you guys notice at the beginning of the episode when Zeb picked up the droid and was going to take him back to the base, and he and Chopper were arguing about how Zeb's in charge, Chopper's not in charge? Did you guys hear Chopper say, "I've got a bad feeling about this"?
Oh, I totally missed
No!
that.
He absolutely did,
Oh,
because
that's funny.
it was wah 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 wah, like literally.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And then later
Yeah.
on, Chopper did say the equivalent of "I told you so." AP5 translated that for him. Oh,
Right.
awesome. I'm gonna
Oh,
go
right.
back and
So-
catch that one.
Yeah, listen to that, because it's definitely, the cadence is exactly like, in all the what we're used to in the episodes. And the other thing was when Chopper was wandering around looking for I can't D help me
EXP.
out, DX. Yeah, yeah.
That guy.
Yeah, exactly.
McQuarrie bot.
It reminded me a lot of when R2 was wandering around the Dune Sea before the Jawas got to him. Just
yeah.
the way the cinematography, the way it was
Right.
shot. And then at the end, another allusion to A New Hope was the scene where Chopper, Zeb, and AP5 were all in the speeder. It looked like the
Right.
deleted scene from A New Hope when Luke and when 3PO is driving the speeder,
Right.
and
Oh,
Luke's
right.
there, and R2's in the back. So
Mhm.
just things I'd picked up that are allusions. They
Right.
always they always do
Yeah.
that. They always throw those in there in those
It's
episodes.
not just design. It's the way they frame
It's the-
scenes. It's
even the sound.
Yeah.
I when Zeb first came up on that perimeter the perimeter post that he was fixing, that speeder sounded just like the Luke speeder, and I thought
Right.
that was just awesome. I love that stuff too.
yeah.
A couple of other like little trivia things that I picked up from the online guide. They said that originally this story was going to be the B story to the Darksaber A story. So the Darksaber is that main theme that's going through, and as you're learning more about the Darksaber story, you kind of flash back to what's going on at Chopper Base. And so, but as they started to develop those, they went ahead and said, "Oh, this is its own story." So they went ahead and kept it that way. Something else that I didn't think that I realized is, those big sort of like coral plants that are there on Chopper Base? Well, the base is actually made on the leaves of those plants. I always just thought it was on the ground.
I saw that on the guide as well, and I always just figured it was on the ground with a bunch of those pike things set up around it.
Right.
But I guess it would make sense to put it up elevated a little bit, just in case one of those goes down, so everyone doesn't get eaten.
Yeah,
That's a
and
good
did you
plan.
also see the other Empire Strikes Back reference that was in the guide? They said that the one of the early scripts from the Empire Strikes Back, that what happened is the probe droid that landed down on the Hoth was actually taken out by one of the Wampas or some of the natural sort of like wildlife in the area, and so
Right.
they use that idea and the Kroikna. You got to say it like an Australian.
Krogna.
Krogna. The Krogna spiders came up and they killed him right away. Like with a knife.
Right.
That's not a knife. That's not a spider.
Well, awesome. I'll tell you what, no matter what show is on or no matter what they're doing with the episode, it's always better when we have the chance to sit down and review it together. I enjoyed talking with you guys quite a bit. So Sean, let's have you sign off real quick. Tell us where people can find you out. Tell us a little bit about your show and how to connect and listen to more of your thoughts.
Yeah. So you can find me several places on. I host Radio Free Tatooine, which is radiofreetatooine.com. We do a weekly Star Wars centric show every Tuesday, and then every Friday we release Galactic War Report, which is all about the Galaxy of Heroes mobile game.
Wow.
So we do two shows a week, and then we also most weeks. Last week I slacked, but we released little snippets, little strategy guides for that game as well, on how to kind of optimize your characters for arena and whatnot.
Excellent.
And you can find me on Twitter at @TheOtherSean and at RF Tatooine.
All right. Say that one more time. It kind of lagged a little bit.
Oh, okay. I say you can find me on Twitter at @TheOtherSean and at RF Tatooine.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Brandon, tell us a little bit about yourself. If people want to hear some more of your thoughts, or if they want to talk Star Wars with you, how can people get a hold of you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Schoonnuts, which is SCHOONNUTZ, because I'm a cool 90s kid, so I spell things with a Z. And I'm not on a cool podcast like Sean is, but
I didn't say I was on a cool podcast.
but I do love to talk Star Wars, and I'm always available to do so. So hit me up. That's where I'll be.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you all very much. And here in closing, I want to just tell everybody that I enjoyed having you here. I'm Spencer Brinkerhoff III. We're recording live from Studios B3. You can find me online at Spencer B3. That's on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. Yeah, that's right, Spencer B3. And tune in again next week. We'll be recording some more Star Wars, Rebels, Roundtables, and we're hoping that it all works. I'm testing out my little video outro right now. Is it playing my logo? I had to do it twice. All right.
Nice.
Thank you all for joining
Thanks
us,
a lot.
and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.